Meanwhile, the European Parliament has called on the European Commission to increase pressure on Saudi Arabia to punish those responsible for the killing. EU Foreign Affairs representative Federica Mogherini said it was important for Europe to have a coordinated response.
We will not just wait for more clarity or ask for it. We will also continue to act together with our partners for achieving clarity. The European Union's reaction from now on will depend on the next steps that will be taken by Saudi authorities. We will continue, first of all, to coordinate among ourselves with united European Union positions, but also we will continue to coordinate with our partners around the world.
We heard there from the EU Foreign Affairs representative, and to discuss this more, I'm joined in the studio by Alastair Sanford. Good morning, Alastair.
Good morning, Belle.
How united has the European response been to this?
Well, European countries have been united in backing the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but not so far in terms of action taken. Now, to a certain extent, that's understandable. They're focusing, first of all, on finding out the exact truth of what happened. Behind that, of course, the reality is that national interests do come into play, and that's openly recognised to some extent. There's been lots of talk about whether to ban arms sales. We had a discussion on this on Raw Politics last night. The only country so far to have taken steps along those lines is Germany, one of the main exporters. But even then, Chancellor Merkel said that the sales were already fairly limited. She's acknowledging the extent of this is perhaps not as having as much impact as might be the case. And there's been also a suggestion that may only apply to new contracts because cancelling existing ones could cause all sorts of problems. France has now overtaken the UK as the top exporter of arms to Saudi Arabia from the EU. It's not cancelling any arms sales, and President Macron is playing down the significance. The UK also, one minister has said that we're not going to be throwing our hands up in the air. The reality is that thousands of jobs are at stake. There was, of course, a joint statement from the UK, France and Germany challenging the Saudi version of events. But so far, action really is limited to suspending visits to the country. For instance, the famous Davos in the Desert conference. And as we've seen, that hasn't stopped trade deals from being done.
So does that mean it's just business as usual?
Well, Federica Mogherini, we've heard saying that national interests must never curb freedom of speech, but the EU needs unanimity to act, and the 28 countries are far from drawing up any united response to this in terms of action. Spain's an interesting case. You might expect it to take a hard line because there's a new socialist government there, but the defence minister has rowed back on a move to cancel the delivery of some laser-guided bombs, which had led to fears they may be used in Yemen. And yesterday, the Congress rejected calls to veto arms sales. Why? Well, let's listen to this from the Spanish socialist MP Antonio Gutierrez.
Ahora bien, señorías,
for us to punish Saudi Arabia, which the United Nations hasn't done, would close a factory in our country that generates 6,000 jobs. It would be more logical and make more sense for us all to agree sanctions, or to punish Saudi Arabia by not buying their oil and gas, which is their main source of wealth.
So an interesting thought there. Instead of talking about arms sales, perhaps just stop buying their oil and gas. Again, perhaps easier said than done. But there's another element to this, and this has been raised. It's the cost of not acting. There were interesting comments yesterday from Marina Litvinenko, who is the widow of the Russian agent Alexander Litvinenko, who was murdered in London in 2006, with evidence strongly pointing to the Russian government. She said that this may lead countries to believe that it's just so easy to kill opponents on foreign soil. And she also brought up the case of the Skripals. So that's another worrying factor, really, that perhaps the cost of European countries finally not taking action against Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that countries like Saudi Arabia might think they can act with impunity. Thank you, Alastair Sanford, in the studio.